Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's National Geographic Explorer classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski. I will be your host for today. For those who have been following along all week long, we've been celebrating our ocean with over 50 live events with different scientists, explorers, conservationists from all over the world who are sharing their passion for the ocean, why it needs to be protected, and some of the really cool research and things they get to do around the world. So we're really excited for today's event. Today we are joining Ruth Leeney. Ruth is a National Geographic Explorer, a marine biologist, social scientist, and science communicator. She's the founder and director of Protect Africa's Sawfishes. She works to better understand where in Africa and elsewhere in the world, in developing nations, where threatened sawfish exist, and then what threats are facing them. So she's passionate about community-led conservation and looking for creative ways to approach science communication, as well as get that conservation message out there to the developing world. So just before we meet Ruth, I'm going to pull open National Geographic's Mapmaker Interactive, and we're going to take a little look at where the classrooms are joining us today, as well as some of the places Ruth gets to work around the world. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment, we're going to share my screen, and we're going to check out some of those areas. So here we are with Mapmaker. And if I move up here, you can see this little X. Go a little closer. That's me here in Guelph, Ontario, here in Canada. And if we look, we've got classes joining us up in the Thunder Bay area, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. If we back up just a little bit more, we've got San Antonio, Texas, with some classrooms joining us. We're going to jump across the ocean. We've got a classroom joining us in Italy today, which is pretty exciting. Ruth is joining us today from Cape Town in South Africa. And just to give you a feel for a couple of her sites, here's the northern area here in Madagascar. If we go across a little bit more, you can find the northern area here in Papua New Guinea. And then we're going to slide all the way back to Peru. So there's just a few areas where Ruth gets to do some of her research around the world. But I think that's enough out of me for now. I'm going to stop my screen share. And Ruth, it is so great to have you joining us for a Hangout today.
Thank you, Joe. Right, well, hello everyone. It's nice to meet you all virtually. I'm just going to, can everyone see me?
Yeah, definitely. Give a big thumbs up and a wave if you can see Ruth. There we go, lots of waving in the little boxes, so that's a positive sign.
Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to see so many people that are interested in learning about sawfish, learning about conservation, and learning about what some of us do for our jobs, and maybe what some of you guys will do one day. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, about how I got into doing this work, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the things that I found out through my work. But I'm going to try not to talk for too long. It's pretty hard because I have a lot of exciting things to tell people about sawfish. But I want to give you lots of time to ask me questions, any questions you have. So I hope you all have lots of questions. So I'm going to share my screen right now and show you a few pictures and a presentation that I made. Okay, how's that? Is that working?
I can see it's loading and then it's going full screen. Yeah, there we go, full screen.
Great. Okay, so I work on sawfish, as I'm sure you all know, and I'm not sure how many of you have ever seen a sawfish before. Probably not too many people, because in general, they're pretty rare, and not many people have ever had the chance to see one. So in 2012, I set up an organization called Protect Africa's Sawfishes. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I set that organization up in a few minutes. So who am I, first of all? Well, that's me, aged 8. I always loved wildlife, but none of my family are really particularly attached to the ocean. Nobody goes sailing, nobody goes scuba diving. So I never really had an upbringing as a kid with a lot of involvement with the ocean. But ever since I was little, when I used to watch Jacques Cousteau documentaries on TV, kind of like the old version of Blue Planet, if any of you have seen that, I used to see the programs with scuba divers encountering whales and fish and all the underwater creatures, and I always thought, well, I want to do that. So, you know, I think for any of you that are interested in the ocean, even if you don't have friends or family who are already involved with ocean or conservation, and even if you live very far from the sea, I don't think it matters at all. I think you should follow your heart. So what do I do? Well, I don't know if any of you have ever seen this this funny picture, which shows what lots of other people think marine biologists do, which is things like playing around with dolphins and maybe hanging out by the beach or going scuba diving every day. And then actually what a lot of marine biologists do is spend a lot of time in front of the computer. So definitely what a lot of my friends think I do is go whale watching or dolphin watching. And actually I used to do some dolphin watching. My research started out being on whales and dolphins. So this is a picture that I took in Namibia in Southwest Africa when I set up a research program there with a friend of mine to learn more about the dolphins in that area. And that was a really exciting project that we ran for several years. But what I really do these days is I spend a lot of time talking to people, which isn't really why I got into marine biology. I wanted to spend lots of time under the sea and looking at all the sea creatures. But what I've learned over the last few years is that if I really want to make a difference, I need to spend time talking to communities, talking to the fishermen who interact with the animals that I want to protect, and talking to government as well to make them understand what the problems are and to help them to decide what they can do to make the situation better. So how did I end up working on Sawfish? Well, I spent a lot of time in West Africa interviewing fishermen. At that time, I was still working on dolphins. I was doing some research on whether people catch and eat dolphin meat in West Africa. And the way that I found out whether they were catching dolphins is by interviewing fishermen. So I got a lot of experience interviewing fishermen. And then one day an organization approached me and they said, well, we want to do a study on sawfish. We know you don't work on sawfish, but we want to use interviews to collect information from fishermen. So maybe you're the right person to do it. So again, it just kind of shows you that you can get a skill in one area and it might lead you down a path to working on something else. So I did that study on sawfish that was in a country called Guinea-Bissau in West Africa. And after I did that, I realized that nobody else was doing any research on sawfish anywhere in Africa. And we really needed to know whether there were any sawfish left in Africa so that we could try and protect them. So that's when I started up my organization, Protect Africa's Sawfishes, and that's what I've been involved in ever since. So this is just a little bit of information on the background to my work. Some researchers in the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, put together this map in 2012 to try and better understand where sawfish still exist and where they used to live in the past. So this map shows the historic species richness, or where we think sawfish used to occur. And if you look at the different colors, you can see that the dark blue color represents 4 species. So we know that there were 4 different species of sawfish present all around northern Australia, and this is Indonesia here, and also around Papua New Guinea. And we know that in Africa, on the west coast, there were 2 species, and also on the east coast and around Madagascar, there were 2 species. So that's what we think things look like in the past, and this is what we think things look like now, which is a very different picture. So I'm sure you guys can see that a lot of this area along the west coast of Africa is now blank. That doesn't actually mean that sawfish are gone. It just means that we didn't have very much information, so we couldn't judge whether sawfish still existed there or not. And even around the US, I know a lot of you are in North America, And you can see that in the past, there were 2 species around much of North America, including Florida here and into Mexico as well. But now we weren't really sure whether there were any sawfish left in Mexico, and we knew that there was only 1 species, the small-tooth sawfish, left around Florida. So there were a lot of gaps in our information. What about all up here around Asia? We really didn't know what was going on, and I wanted to try and address some of those gaps and collect as much information as I could, especially for the African continent. So why are sawfish populations disappearing? Well, they get caught in a lot of fishing nets. Unfortunately, when you've got a big toothy saw like sawfish do, it's very easy to get entangled in any kind of fishing net. There are a lot of people catching sharks nowadays to export their fins to China. Maybe some of you know about that already. And the fins of sawfish are considered to be a kind of shark fin as well, and they're very valuable. So when a fisherman catches a sawfish, if he's poor, he prefers to cut off the fins and sell them because he knows he can make a lot of money. And finally, when sawfish lose their habitats, so sawfish love areas like mangroves and rivers in the case of the large-toothed sawfish, and also some shallow coastal areas. And when we destroy those coastal areas, those mangroves, by cutting down the mangrove trees, or by building big hotels on the coast, or by pollution, then we're destroying the habitats the sawfish need, and then they don't do so well. So I'll just finish up now by telling you how I do my research. In most places, like in Australia, where there are still lots of sawfish, people put nets into the water to try and catch sawfish. Usually they do this at night because that's when sawfish are more active. And then when they've caught a sawfish, they very carefully take it out of the net, try and keep it in the water. And then they will put a tag on the sawfish, usually on the first dorsal fin, like that one. And what that allows us to do is to track the movements of the sawfish. So these are 2 tracks of sawfish that had tags put on them off the coast of Florida. And that helps us to understand which areas sawfish use and also what dangers they might encounter when they go into those areas. Unfortunately, my research isn't quite like that. So as I told you all already, because we don't really know the areas where in Africa where sawfish still exist, I have to start right from the beginning. I can't go and put a net in the water somewhere for sawfish because I might never catch anything. So I talk to fishermen and I find out if they've ever seen a sawfish or caught a sawfish. And the more fishermen I talk to, the better idea I get about the important areas where people regularly see sawfish. And I also go and look at the landings, the kinds of animals that fishermen bring back to the beach. And I look for the saw of the sawfish, or it's also called a rostrum. And that gives me a good idea. If I find a village where there are lots of saws, then I have a good idea that people probably catch sawfish there. And it also tells me what species is present, because each species of sawfish has a different shape of saw. Okay, so finally, I'll just tell you very quickly about some work I did last year, funded by National Geographic, to go to Papua New Guinea. Now, I was going to test you guys and see if you knew where Papua New Guinea was, but Joe has already told you. So there it is. It's just to the north of Australia. That's the island of New Guinea. And this left-hand side is part of Indonesia, and the right-hand side of the island is called Papua New Guinea. So I went there to do a rapid search for sawfish to see if they still existed. And like I said, Northern Australia is a really important area for sawfish. So given how close Papua New Guinea is to Northern Australia, it seemed like we had a pretty good chance of finding sawfish there. And sure enough, we did. So after 5 years of searching for sawfish in Africa and never seeing any live animals, you can probably see from my face that I was pretty happy to find some sawfish in Papua New Guinea. And we were able to, there were 2 baby sawfish, this one is one of them, that fishermen caught in their nets, and we were able to release them alive back into the ocean. I also do some outreach and education. So I've developed a book and a short film to share with children throughout Africa, and also to share with adults and communities around Africa, which has been a lot of fun. And if we have some time, I'm happy to show you some of that film later, or I'm happy also to send the link so that you can watch it on YouTube. So that's it, really. That's the link at the bottom of that page there for where you can download a free PDF of the educational book about sawfish. It's called The King of the Fishes, and it's free to download for anyone who wants to have a read. So I hope you will be able to take a look. Okay, let's finish up there.
All right.
And yeah.
Perfect. So green button one more time, we'll have you back. There we go. All right. Well, Ruth, thank you so much for that great presentation. I think it's amazing that you went so long searching and looking, and I'm so excited for you that you managed to find some live ones in Papua New Guinea. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really exciting.
Just try hitting the green button one more time, Ruth. It seems to be slow on us coming back.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There we go. We got you now.
How's that? Okay.
All right. And then I can't believe I gave away the answer to the test. Oh, man.
Don't worry, I'll think of some other questions to quiz them on.
Okay, perfect. So before I forget, if you want to send me a link to some of those resources, I'll make sure they get out to the classrooms after the hangout so they can check them out.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think it's about time we meet some classrooms because I'm sure they have some great questions. So as I mentioned earlier, we have classrooms joining us from all sorts of great places across North America, even one joining us from Italy. So let's get started. So our first class, let's see. Let's go to Freehold, New Jersey with a grade 3 classroom with Mrs. Reading. Let me find their microphone and turn it on for them. Good morning, Grace.
Everyone say hi. Hi. All right.
Hi, everyone.
We actually combined all of our 3rd grade classrooms, so we have a packed house, and they're very excited to meet you. So thank you.
Amazing. Lovely to meet you all.
What inspired you to want to work to conserve and save sawfish?
What inspired me? Yeah, I guess I love sawfish. I think they're really interesting and weird looking animals. So I think they're inspiring just by themselves, but also I'll tell you a secret. I'm not really just a sawfish fan. I'm a fan of all things in the ocean. So I used to work on dolphin conservation for a long time. And I'm also really passionate about reducing plastic in the ocean and educating people about how to reduce their plastic waste and clean up our coastlines. So I'm definitely inspired to work on sawfish because they're such a rare animal and they're so weird looking. And I think we should keep weird and wonderful animals like that in our oceans. But I'm also just inspired in general by the ocean. I love it. I think it's a beautiful place and it's something that we all need. Even if we don't live by the sea, we all need the ocean.
All right, great question to get us started and a great point about everybody needing the ocean. Okay, so I just want to give a quick shout out. We've got classrooms who are viewing live on YouTube. If you do have any questions for us, there's a YouTube chat sidebar on the right. Send us in some questions and let us know where you're watching from. I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Hill's class in Massachusetts, grade 5s. They should be watching along, so send us a question. And then I think we might have some grade 11s in San Antonio, Texas watching along as well. So don't forget to send in some of your questions. So let's go to another classroom now. Let's see. Let's visit. There we go. Let's go to Caldwell, New Jersey this time with a grade 2 classroom. with Mrs. Fior. Let me see if I can turn your microphone on. There we go. Hey, grade 2s.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. How did the sawfish disappear?
How did the sawfish disappear? I guess you mean like what made their numbers start decreasing? Is that right?
Yeah.
Right, that's a good question. We think that it's probably because, let me go back and see if I can and show you this slide again. We think it's probably because of 3 different things. One is that the sawfish has this wonderful saw, which helps it to, well, maybe that's a good question to quiz you on. Do you guys know what the sawfish uses its saw for?
No.
Does anyone have a guess? I see someone with their hand up.
To protect itself.
To protect itself? Yeah, probably a little bit, but what about something else?
To find food.
Very good, yeah, to find food. So sawfish have all these electroreceptors. That means they have a way of detecting electromagnetic pulses in the water. So it means that the sawfish's saw is the most sensitive part of a sawfish's body, kind of like our fingertips or our lips. And when he swims around in the water, or she, they can detect the movements of other fish in the water. So they use their saw to find a fish that they want to eat, and then they slash the saw from side to side to kill the fish or to stun it, and then they go over and eat the fish. So the sawfish's saw is super useful as a way of finding food, and you're right, for protecting itself if a big mean crocodile comes around. But unfortunately, it also means that whenever a sawfish gets close to a net, what do you think happens? Yeah. Just shout it out. It gets caught, that's right, yeah. So imagine if you had this big long nose with lots of things sticking out of it, and you got close to a net, you would very easily get all tangled up in the net, wouldn't you? And that's what happens to sawfish. So anytime they come close to a net, they usually get tangled up. And these days, there are a lot of fishing nets in the water because there are more and more people that want to catch fish, that more and more people going fishing. So that means more fishing nets means more sawfish get caught, unfortunately. And so I'm also going to show you this picture here. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, it's just loading up.
Okay, so you might remember that I showed you this slide. That's a picture of a sawfish that's gotten tangled up in a fishing net. And then that's a fin from a shark. And unfortunately, what happens is that a lot of fishermen cut the fins off sawfish because they know they're very valuable. There are people in Asia who like to eat soup made from shark fins. And that means that the fins of any kind of shark, including sawfish, are very valuable. And the fishermen in places like Africa and in some other countries around the world, usually they're pretty poor and they don't have a lot of ways of making money. So if they know that they can sell the fins of a sawfish and make some extra money for their family, they usually want to do that. So that means that whenever they catch a sawfish now, they usually have to, or they usually decide to cut its fins off. And then the last reason why sawfish are disappearing is because they're losing their habitats. So this is a picture of a mangrove that some people had cut down. So there used to be lots and lots of trees there. And the sawfish would live in the water right next to the mangrove trees. And that's a very safe place for them. But when when we cut down all the mangrove trees, then it means that there's no safe place for sawfish anymore.
All right. Well, a great question and a great answer. I'm glad we were able to get a quiz question in there. Okay. Well, let's meet our next classroom. So we have, let's see, we're going to go to Italy this time. So we've got a grade 2 class joining us with Mrs. Town in Bergamo. And let me turn their microphone on. Let's see how loud they can be. How's everyone doing, grade 2s? All right, great. Yeah, who's got a question?
Nicolo has a question. Nicolo, come closer to the computer.
Why is the sawfish so aggressive when they get the fish?
Were you able to understand him?
Yes, I did. That was very nicely read. Thank you. Why is the sawfish so aggressive when he gets the fish? Well, I don't think he is very aggressive, actually. I mean, he has to shake his saw because that's the way that he or she catches a fish. But the cool thing about sawfish actually is that they're not very aggressive. They're actually very shy animals. So, you know, a lot of people are scared of sharks, and sharks are probably way more scared of people than we should be scared of sharks, because humans kill a lot more sharks than sharks kill people. But some sharks have sharp teeth in their mouth. Sawfish don't. They have very, very small, not sharp teeth in their mouth. And there's no way they could eat a person. And they don't even really like hanging out with people. So if you try and get in the water with a sawfish, it usually swims away. It's very shy. So even though you might think that they're aggressive when they're hunting, that's just because they're hungry, probably. Maybe like you, if you haven't had your lunch and you feel hungry, you might be a little bit excited about getting a sandwich. So in the same way, sawfish have to hunt so that they can survive. But they're definitely not aggressive when they meet humans. Thank you. That was a great question.
All right. Thank you for that question. Let's visit another classroom now. Let's go to Gap, Pennsylvania with Mrs. Gervin's group of grade 5 students. Let me turn their microphone on. Good morning, grade 5s.
Morning.
Morning. It's actually afternoon where I am.
How big can the saw get on the sawfish?
Can you say that again, please?
How big can the saw get on the sawfish?
Ah, okay, great. Well, sawfish, I don't think I said this to you actually. Sawfish are the 3rd biggest fish in the sea. So does anyone know what the first biggest fish in the very good. And what's the second? Anyone know what the second biggest is? No, okay. The first biggest is a whale shark. Well done to whoever said that. The second biggest is a basking shark. That's a kind of shark that's usually found mostly in the northern hemisphere, but they like colder waters. So there's a lot of them around where I come from, which is Ireland. And then the 3rd biggest are the sawfish. Not all of the species of sawfish, but 2 species of sawfish called the green sawfish and the large tooth sawfish can grow up to 7 meters in length for the total fish, and that includes the saw. So now I've got a maths quiz for you. If the saw usually a sawfish's saw is between 22 and 25%, or 1/4 of the whole sawfish body length, right? So who's good at maths? Can you work out if a sawfish was 7 meters from the tip of its tail to the tip of its saw, how long would the saw be if it's 1/4 or 25% of the whole sawfish?
21 feet.
7 meters is 21 feet. Yeah, sorry, I forgot you guys work in feet and not meters. So if the sawfish is 21 feet in length, how long is the saw? If it's 25% of 21 feet. Or let's say 20 feet to be, just to make it easy. What's 25% of 20 feet? 5 feet, right? Yeah, good. So that's how long, if you had a 20-foot sawfish, which is almost as big as they get, maybe they get a little bit bigger, then its saw would be 5 feet long, which is pretty long, right? Almost, well, it's just a bit shorter than I am. That's a long saw.
All right. I bet they weren't expecting a math quiz, so good work.
Good work
great.
on the maths, everyone.
All right. Let's see. Let's go to Terrace Bay, Ontario. We've got some grade 5-6s with Mrs. Kurliak. Let me turn her microphone on. Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good morning.
All right. Who's got a question? Oh, you're gonna have to come closer. Yeah. Nice. And close.
How many species of sawfish are there in the world?
How many species? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, there's 5 species. Yeah. They're called the large-toothed sawfish, the green sawfish, the small-toothed sawfish, which is the one that you get around the southeast of the US, the dwarf sawfish, which lives only in Australia, and the narrow sawfish. So 5 species. And if you're interested in learning more about those, I can also send a link to Joe that he can share with you, which has an identification guide to the 5 different species in the world. So you can take a look at that and you can see what the differences are between the different species.
All right, awesome. So I'm just going to check in really quickly with Mrs. Hildebrandt's class. They're joining us from New Jersey. Give me a big wave if you can hear me. There they are. So I don't believe their microphone's working. So if you want to send us in a question or two via the YouTube chat sidebar. Oh, there it is already.
There it is.
So there's a 2-parter, or looks like we got a couple. So we could, is the sawfish related to the stingray, and how long are their lifespan?
Right, good questions. Yeah, I didn't go into that, but maybe some of you, if you've read a little bit about sawfish already, you might know this. So in the big group that we call the chondrichthyans, which includes sharks, rays, and another kind of animal called a chimera, we have those 3 groups, and the sharks and rays are of course related, but they look quite different. Now, a sawfish kind of looks like a shark, right? But actually it's a ray. It belongs to the same family as stingrays. So yes, you're right. The sawfish is related to the stingray. It's much more closely related to stingrays and manta rays than it is to other sharks. Next question, how long is their lifespan? That is a great question, one that I get asked very often, and the honest answer is that we don't know. So there are a lot of things that we don't know about sawfish because very few people have done research on them. So maybe one of you guys can become a sawfish researcher in the future and answer that question. I would be very grateful because I get asked that a lot. So I'd like to have an answer. And then when were they first discovered? Gosh, I don't know. But I can answer that. One of the cool things that I love about sawfish is that they are very important to traditional human cultures around the world. So, for example, if you look at the culture in Papua New Guinea, there are a lot of tribes that live along the river where I was doing my research, and they used to carve the image of a sawfish into the front of their canoes that they would go out fishing in, and some of them would make big masks that they would put on their heads in the shape of sawfish, and whenever they had a party or a celebration for a wedding or a funeral, They would wear these masks and they would do a traditional dance. There's lots of other places as well. Northern Australia, the indigenous Australians have a lot of cultural importance for sawfish. Central America, Panama, Mexico. So there are a lot of different cultures around the world that have known about sawfish for a long time and have interacted with them. And many of those cultures believe that sawfish are very powerful animals, that they're almost like a spirit animal. And often in those cultures, they protected sawfish and they didn't really try to kill, they certainly didn't eat them. So that probably answers your question in that I guess sawfish have been known about for a very long time. I can't tell you when the first like Western European or American scientist came across a sawfish, but humans have known about them for a very long time, which is not really surprising when you think about the fact that they live in rivers, they live in very shallow coastal water. So when there were many sawfish hundreds of years ago, I'm guessing people saw them all the time.
All right. A little group of questions. Thanks so much to our class in New Jersey. I'm just going to give one more shout out to Mr. Hill's grade 5s joining us in Massachusetts. So they were going to join us on camera, but there was a little bit of speaker trouble, but I'm glad that they're watching along with us today. So that's awesome. Ruth, I think we can squeeze in one more question before we sign off for today. So if a classroom wants to give me a big wave, if they definitely have one more really good burning question, and I'll pick a classroom. And it's so hard, so many classrooms. But I'm going to turn on the mic. Every hand is waving, of course. Mrs. Gervin's class, if you guys want to go ahead with one more.
Did you ever find any sawfish that were dead?
I did. Unfortunately, that's a very sad question to end on. But yeah, I found a dead sawfish in Papua New Guinea. But it's not something that I have seen very often. And really the goal of my work is to find live sawfish and then work with the communities in those places to help them understand why it's important, not just for me, and not just for people far away, but also for those people living in the places where sawfish still occur. Why it's important for them to protect sawfish. Do you guys have any ideas about why that would be important? Why do we care if sawfish are still stick around for another 50 years or go on?
Stink. They're endangered.
Yeah, they are endangered, but why is that important? Why should we care? Why is it important to have lots of different kinds of animal in the ocean and in the river?
Because every animal has a part in nature. Yes.
Spot on. Excellent answer. So it's what we call biodiversity. When there are lots and lots of different animals in an ecosystem, even if that's the ocean or a river or a forest, that's called biodiversity. And we need biodiversity because when there are lots of different animals and plants, each one of those has its own purpose, right? Each one has its own job. And if we take one of those away, we don't know what's going to happen. The balance is going to change in that ecosystem and it might not be so healthy anymore. So it's really important that we help people to understand that saving sawfish is not just good for the sawfish, it's also good for them because it means that their rivers and their oceans will stay healthy. Great job. I'm really impressed that you guys could answer that so well.
Put that same class under a lot of pressure with the math question and then that question.
I like to test.
Just typed in by Terrace Bay. Are they egg layers or live birth?
Oh no, they're live birth. Yeah.
Live birth. All right, very cool. Okay, well, Ruth. Well, first of all, classrooms, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Your questions, as always, were great. It's always fun to peek into your rooms and see what you're thinking about. And Ruth, thank you so much for spending a little time with us to celebrate the ocean and share your passion and the creatures, the marine animals you like to study.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe, and thank you to all the classrooms. It's been really fun to meet you all, and I loved your questions. So I hope that you will all stay interested in helping our oceans.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Here come the microphones, boys and girls. Nice and loud if you want to say goodbye and thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out today. Lots more ocean fun to come over the rest of the week, so keep tuning in. Ruth, again, thank you so much, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.